Hello and welcome to the Shards of Orn. This is a tutorial for our class building system. So I've had a lot of people get on and tinker with it and say that they're not quite sure how to use it, what to do, and this should help clear some of your misconceptions up, make it a little easier, maybe give you a better idea of what to go for. First things first, that whole with great power comes great responsibility shtick. This is a lot of freedom. There's a whole lot of freedom here. You can build pretty much any class you can think of, and I've done some work to make it easier, but at the end of the day, because of the rules that are required to make classes self-balancing, you're going to have to put up with some work. Now, if you don't feel up to that, that's perfectly fine. If you want to play a class somebody else built, chances are you'll probably still only be the only one playing that class. I've made half a dozen different classes personally. I'm sure we've got a lot of other theory crafters out there who have built a number themselves. So chances are very good that you'll be able to find something that you like that will still be unique if you are willing to put up with somebody else's creation. That said, this is for those adventurous people who really want to delve deep and learn the system and build something truly very custom and unique. So don't feel overwhelmed. Give it a shot. If you don't like it, don't use it. Let somebody else build stuff for you. I'm sure that there will be folks who even get so good at it that they start taking commissions. So, a couple bucks or a couple karma, maybe somebody will build you a custom class. I don't think that that's a bad system at all. So just like any character, I suggest always starting with a concept. Don't walk into it and just shop around. The system does allow you to do that, but you'll do a much better job if you walk into it with some idea of what you're going for first. Now, I'm going to go ahead and build Nick's class. We've already discussed it at length, so I have a pretty good idea of what he wants. He got a brand new spear for Christmas, and he's still playing Bluck. So he's going to be kind of an Angori spear wielder, and he's been excited about a few sort of gimmicky mechanics, but I'm not going to judge, where he wants to call lots of pierce attacks, and he wants to do kill, heal stuff. He gets excited by killing people and impaling them. So we got a pretty good idea. But what I recommend before you even get into the ability part of the class, before you even create the class itself, is browse through the different componentry. Browse through the triggers, browse through the effects, the modifiers. Start brainstorming for yourself how this class is going to work. So in the case of Nick's Bloody Impaler, I know that he's probably going to go with the two-hander trigger, which is fine and fairly optimal. He's going to be using a two-handed weapon most, if not all of the time, so that makes perfect sense. He doesn't need shield. He probably doesn't need spell. He's not much of a spellcaster. Maybe avenging, but probably not. So we have an idea of what we're going to use. Now you can click into any one of these, and I need to improve the interface here, but you can see, for instance, here are the different things that I compare with the two-hander trigger. So if I wanted to, I could give him push abilities. Makes a degree of sense. I could give him maim or bleed or crit or what have you. And if I just do a little bit of simple math, I know that two-hander's -1, and let's see, what's something I feel like giving him? I know he's going to want bleed, just because that's fun and it makes sense thematically for the class. So bleed is level 3, -1, so the ability level of a two-hander bleed effect is 2. I've already done the work to go through that brainstorming process, so I won't belabor it here, but what I like to do is sit down and list out by broad effect type, so passives, combat, and narratives, and by level, and kind of lay that out, add up the total XP that I expect, and make sure that that's kosher. So the way the math on a class works, take the category you're spending the most XP in. So in Nick's case, I know that it's going to be combat. He has something like 388 XP worth of combat abilities. and then add together the other two and make sure that they add up to at least that much. Mathematically, that's how you need to make sure you're balancing. So I know he's got 279 XP worth of passives, and I know he's got 102 XP worth of narratives. So he's not quite balanced, but he's pretty darn close. Should be enough to get us into the teens as far as levels go. But like I said, go through, brainstorm effects, brainstorm everything, brainstorm and jot down things, especially in order of level, so that you aren't stuck looking through, because while the ability to browse every possible effect is quite nice, I find that it tends to be overwhelming if you don't know which way you're going. So that's just how I do it. Now, caveat emptor, this is just my method. This is what I like to do. This seems to work well for me, and it appeals to my aesthetic, because I like to arrange abilities by level. I don't like to say, hey, here's a first or second level ability that you're getting in your teens, because that doesn't make any sense to me. So I kind of like them arranged low to high. The system doesn't force you to do that. You can, for instance, say that one particular ability is very signature, very key to the build, and kind of focus on getting that as early as possible, to the exclusion of other things that might come later and be lower level. You can jump around a little bit, and that's entirely up to you. Let's see. So now that I've got a list of abilities that I'm pretty sure I want, I'm going to go ahead and go to the classes section of the website, and I'm going to name it. Let's call this, I was going to call it the Blood-Soaked Impaler originally, but I think that that's not great. Let's call it a Blood Pike. Nick is free to rename this later if he so chooses. Save and publish, and go to Edit Abilities. Now, because of the rules for class building, and I recommend when you're going here, review these, make sure you know them, because otherwise they might trip you up. You only get passive combat and narrative, not downtime abilities. So trades actually dictate downtime abilities. I'll be walking through those later. They're a bit simpler than classes anyway. You can't have the same main type at more than half of your current XP total at any given point. So that's why I was saying, take the one that you're clearly focused on, add up the amount of XP there, and make sure that the other two categories add up to at least that much, and then you know that you're reasonably well balanced. If it isn't, then you need to make some changes. You have some hard decisions to make. You know, maybe you find a way to justify a narrative that otherwise didn't seem to make a lot of sense, or maybe that you didn't want that badly because, hey, your class is not balanced. You can't grant any one ability worth more than 1/3 of your total XP at any point. So if you do the math, you'll find out that lower levels, you can usually get away with a level at most higher than your current character level. So level 1 character could have level 2 abilities, level 2 could have level 3 abilities. It very quickly gets to the point where the highest conceivable ability level is equal to your character level. And then after 10th level, that kind of starts to dip. So a lot of people have noticed that getting dodge into a build takes a lot of effort, especially if you want to get it early. That's intentional. Dodge is hard and dodge is nice. But the earliest mathematical time you could possibly achieve a dodge is level 10, and it's a level 10 ability. You might start to get into level 11, 12, 13 abilities, and you start to see that it dips the other way. You might not be able to achieve those at the exact level, character level, but it's close-ish. The first ability a class grants must be a basic attack proficiency, so you'll notice that these are saying I have to pick one basic attack proficiency. Nobody gets to come into play without having some kind of an attack they can do. In this case, I'm going to choose use melee weapon. It's a two-handed based class, but it's still a very melee heavy class. I want to make sure that it's got options. So I picked that one. And then you've got some maximum limits. I don't find myself butting into these very often. I find you have to really go out of your way to choose more than 7 immunities. I know early on Brian was trying to make a juggernaut class with all the immunities, and yeah, that's the reason that exists, because when you get really unbalanced and really single-sided, things get bad for the game. So you probably won't run into these very much. but they're there, and if you find that there's an option missing, chances are you've hit one of these. I know Billy was building out one of his hybrid seer warlocky class early on, and he had done 7 combat abilities pretty early, and wasn't able to get Vanish. So be sure to plan ahead for that. That's why I recommend brainstorming. Alright, so we've got our first passive. I like to group them, so we're going to do carry. Where was that? So you can filter this if you have a specific thing in mind. I don't have any other passives that I want to give this class early on. I recommend combat abilities at first level. Something worth noting is that classes are not characters. A lot of people are approaching this with the idea that you're trying to build your character, and that's not true. Your character is one instance of a person with this class at one point along that whole progression. A class is actually a journey. So what you want to plan around, if you're doing it right, in my opinion, is what does this class need at every point in its journey to feel like a character of this class? So what does my Blood Pike class need to feel like a Blood Pike at level 1? Well, I'll tell you what, I need some two-hander abilities. So let's see, I want to sort by two-hander, and I know one of the things that I really want is heavy damage with a two-hander, because why not? So that'll be one of my first abilities. I also know that I want a two-hander pin attack, because this is going to be one of the main mechanics of the class. He wants to be able to impale people and crit them as he's holding them up in the air. It's fantastic. So give it pin. And he also wants to really enjoy the experience. Like, this is, yeah. So we'll give him Slay Heal 1. And because we need to fill out level 1 a little bit more, we'll also give it a narrative effect. So I'll give it Inspect Arms. You know, this is a melee intensive class, obviously very soldiery, so Inspect Arms makes sense. Now we've gotten past level 1, and your level 1 character, your level 1 version of this class, can use any melee weapon, kind of big and brawny, can carry people off the battlefield, and specializes in pinning people, damaging them, and feeling really good about that experience. So what does it need at level 2? So if you look lower, you'll start to see things are maybe not opening up as much as we would like. Gained at level 112 XP. So there seems to be an issue with that. I'll have to address in a minute. Let's see, we need to give him some more narrative abilities. Let's give him Ride. Ride kind of makes sense to me, you know, sort of a mounted class. I could see them charging on horseback. And just because narratives, I find that narratives are the things that I like the least, but they need to be worked into the build to give it context, so we'll give it Tumble as well. Now, if you're paying close attention to character progressions, you'll know that a first level character walks in with 12 and immediately will gain at least 16 XP, so by their second game they'll be at 28. So getting just Ride and Tumble for your second game probably ain't so great. Let's switch back to combat abilities now that we've got a little more room. What else did I want to give him? So you can sort by upgrades. So let's make that pin a Pierce. Big on piercing attacks. And let's make that Slay Heal 1, a free ability. So now we're cooking with gas. We've got the ability to pierce, pin, to hit people hard, and to heal every time you drop somebody, which is pretty awesome. So you'll find that you kind of need to switch back and forth. You're pivoting. So if you imagine this on a scale, you've got kind of your passives on the left, kind of your combat abilities on the right, and I like to put the narratives in the middle because I focus on them the least. and you need to make sure that the scale doesn't tip too far in one direction or the other. So let's take a look at passives. What was the next passive I wanted to give him? So Nick doesn't like to wear armor, so I'm going to give him armor. Armor 1. Awesome ability to get. People playing this class won't quite get that after their second game. They'll get it after their third, so they should feel pretty happy about that. And we can probably switch back to combat abilities a bit. I think that two-hander 2 hits. No, we're not quite there yet. Let's see. Oh, that's fun. Why don't we do bleed instead? Give them another combat ability. So two-hander bleed. And you'll see the flip-flop. You've got passive, combat, narrative, combat, passive, combat. Probably need to work another narrative in pretty soon. The system will take care of letting you know when you absolutely must, because you won't see any other options appearing down here. Let's see if we can upgrade that two-hander to a burst. Not quite. We could put Pierce Bleed in here, but they just got that ability. I'll let that upgrade later. And we don't need like Party Ride or anything. So let's switch back. We just gave that. I'm going to do some more narratives, just 1 or 2. And this is not an entirely melee-only class. I find that that's difficult in this system, just because a lot of the higher-level narratives that you have to work into the build are hard to justify otherwise. Actually, I thought about this one. We're going to call this one Talking Stick. So they're kind of blood-soaked, they're kind of necromantic, and, you know, putting heads on pikes and having those heads talk sounds like fun to me. Also, some history with powwow. We've always called it the Talking Stick, so this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but who cares? It's fun. If you're having fun, you're doing it right. Alright, now maybe we can do the burst 2 hits. Nick specifically requested bursts rather than normal hits. He's going to pierce people, but he wants the ability to deal with crowds too. An interesting thing to note about modifiers is that you can willingly drop them and deliver it normally. So this two-hander burst 2 hits could be just the normal two-hander 2 hits if he doesn't feel like calling the burst part of it. Perfectly fine. It's a downgrade in any case. This is why immune to gaze doesn't immediately shut down somebody who has a bunch of gaze attacks. They could just switch right back to packets and, you know, you've shut down their ability to automatically hit you, but it doesn't shut them down entirely. Alright, so we've got a narrative of combat. Why don't we switch back to a passive? And what do we got next on the passive list? So he's going to start getting some immunities. I think immune disarm is a solid idea. Melee heavy classes really need to not lose their weapons. So we'll add that next. And while we're adding immunities, maybe it'll let us add immune soothe. I don't see bloody pikemen being easy to dissuade from impaling you. So immune soothe seems like a solid. And now we can pivot. We can go back to combat. And I think I had that pierce bleed. I talked about upgrading that, right? So let's say that the two-hander pierce bleed is next. We've got the self-heal free, or slay heal free, pierce bleed. Maybe we can upgrade the slay heal. You'll find that things start to take off very quickly as the cost of abilities rise. You know, we've got everything we need to feel like a blood pike already. We've got the ability to deal burst damage, we've got the ability to pierce, pierce bleed, and pierce pin. And really, at this point, we've got most of the signature abilities, and we're just upgrading them over time. Let's see, what else do we need? I want to start Crit versus Confine. Let's see if that's available yet. That is a signature ability of the class, and like I was saying earlier, if you want to jump around a bit, so no, it doesn't look like we have room opened up yet which kind of fits because it's a level 6 ability and we're only level 4.8 right now, so that's a bit of a stretch. Let's add in a few more abilities, and maybe, okay, armor 2, that's solid. And obviously that was a passive, so now I've actually delayed getting crit versus confined until even later, but that's okay, because we've got other combat abilities that we want. Two-hander burst, nope, not quite. We want burst 3 hits next. There's actually nowhere else we want to go with this pierce bleed. We don't want to burst heal. And pierce pin, two-hander pierce pin 2. There we go. That's a solid upgrade. Now let's see if maybe, no, still not opened up. These filters only show valid options, so you're never going to see a filter in here that would filter it down to nothing unless you use more than one at a time.
Get out.
Let's see. Propel. Back and forth we go seesawing over these numbers. The reasoning should be clear, but I want to make sure that you have a good mix. I want to make sure that that mix is gained over the entire progression, and I want to make sure you can't just jump straight to the highest level abilities possible. All of this is very neat and well balanced and feels very class-like. You know, as I gain my progression, I'm gaining different abilities at different points, and they're slowly gaining momentum. They're slowly going up higher in level. Let's see, we've been looking for that crit versus confined. We can't quite get it yet. Two-hander pierce 2s, not yet. Slay, can't get heal 3s yet. Two-hander pierce, nope, no pierce pin 3 yet. So here's where things might get a little tricky. You might hit a point where it doesn't quite feel smooth, you're not quite sure where to go next. Just work at it. And here's an example of I used 2 filters that make no sense together and you didn't see anything. But if you only use 1 filter at a time, okay, we can't quite afford a two-hander maim, but that's on my list of things to add. I think I'm going to have to add a passive. I don't want to because I want to save up for crit versus confined, but I don't think I have a choice. So I'm going to go with immune ruin. And this class will just have to wait a little bit longer than it otherwise would for crit versus confined. Not the worst thing in the world. They can still pin people and, you know, it's not critical damage, but, you know, impaling them is still going to hurt. Okay, now let's see what can upgrade from here. Can we do burst 3 hits? Yeah, we could. What other options have we got? If you note, I've made it force all the upgrades to the top of the list, so if you don't want to filter by all upgrades, or a particular upgrade, you could just see here are the upgrades we're allowed. So a lot of these are things that I don't plan on giving to this class. Party abilities, Slay Heal 3 free is a solid next choice. No bursts, and then we got two-hander burst 3 hits. Seems like the next best thing. And maybe, if it'll let me, I'll get that that higher heal. Now, it looks like I have chosen too many combat abilities. That was a level 7 ability. I'm not terribly surprised by that. So you'll notice that, you know, I can't upgrade any of them, and there are very few combat abilities I could choose. Most of them are very, very low level. So I'm not going to bother with combat as my next option. But maybe, just maybe, I'll get lucky. And there's the crit versus confined. Seesaw back the other way. And at level 8.7, we now have the Blood Pike doing Pierce Pin 2, Burst 3 hits, and critting versus confined. So Pierce Pin 2, 3 crit, 3 crit, 3 crit. Ow! I don't want to fight him. Do you want to fight him? Yeah, Hopefully you've got some way to deflect, or you've got some way to be immune to pin, or blink away. I mean, at this point, it's level 8.7, so the person he's fighting probably has some tricks up their sleeve too, and that's fairly well balanced. I know that we need to grab a maim at some point soon. So let's throw that in there. Just save myself some time. I'll just do both. Two-hander maim. Eventually that'll be a pierce maim, but I don't like to rush these things. I like to let them upgrade a little bit over time. I haven't done a narrative in a good long while, you'll note. So I'll go ahead and throw a narrative in. As I'm talking through this, I feel like, who's that artist guy who has the happy little sunsets? Bob Ross, right. So, locate. There's a story behind this. Nick had a bounty hunter character named Javis. He'll say it was Jovis. He's wrong. Yes, I know his character's name's better than he does. But he had a spinning stick that he would use at Crossroads. Keg actually had a magic item that did this, but I feel like giving it a little more character here. Again, tongue-in-cheek, but hey, blood pikes, maybe at some point their pikes become magically attuned and they can say, lead me to the thing I'm looking for, and spin it on the ground and it'll point in the right direction. Seems fun. And then we're just going through and we're upgrading things. It feels like I haven't done, I did that crit passive, which was nice, but we're past level 10 at this point, so maybe it's time to start upping the armor. So armor 3. That's a 9th level passive, so that's the biggest passive I plan on putting on this character. You'll notice that was almost a full level by itself. That's 2 or 3 games just to wait for that upgrade. So that's fine. This class has everything it absolutely needs at this point. Let me just look through the upgrade list. So a lot of stuff I don't plan on doing. We've got Pierce Pin 3. Now it's here we go. Two-hander Pierce Pin 3 is much nicer. Two-hander Pierce Maim. Or let's see, nothing. Two-hander Burst 4 hits is very solid, but that's a level 11 ability, and I don't feel like jumping straight to that. Some people might feel differently. I like to kind of go in order of levels, so let's just do the two-hander abilities. Did I already give it Slay Heal 3? I'm not sure. Last Slay was Slay Heal 2, so yeah, that hasn't been upgraded in a good long while. Let's do that instead. This particular program is throwing around a lot of data. I have heard that some people have had difficulties with their browser crashing. I do apologize for that. If I could find another way to do it, I would. Let's see. So, Slay, Heal 2, free. Pretty sure that only goes to Slay, Heal 3, free. Or bursts if we really felt like it. But this isn't a very friendly Happy Kitty Bunny Pony class that's going to share with its friends. It's going to impale, feel good about it, impale, repeat. A lot of that is just the character of the class in my mind. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's see, we've got Maims. Maim could probably stand to be upgraded at this point. What did I want to give that? So that was going to be a Pierce Maim. Nasty. You'll see I am kind of skipping around a little bit. Now, you don't find any really low-level abilities at really high levels, but here I skipped to 9, then 7, then 6, and that's perfectly all right. The order is largely up to you as long as it fits together. Let's get that burst hit. Oh, no, see, it's no longer on the list, so we're getting to the point where we need to start thinking about not combat abilities. That's fine. I've got a couple other passives that I had planned on adding in. Let's go with immunities. Immunities are simple and fun. So maybe immune burst, if that's on this list. Yeah. They're in the thick of melee. Getting automatically hit by every burst is going to really, really hurt. And maybe, I doubt I can get another level 6 immunity right off the bat, but we'll see. Can we do immune fear? Again, kind of like with the soothe, they don't seem like the sort that's going to be dissuaded. I could have just given them a rage ability. In retrospect, that might have been more appropriate both thematically and mechanically. But, yeah, I'm good with it. A lot of people will get to the end of a class progression having gone through the process and find that maybe they have other selections that they would have made. I do apologize for how this is done, because what I had originally intended is the ability to drag and drop and move things up and down, put things in the middle, and really revise stuff. But because of the amount of logic that goes into knowing what's valid as a next choice, that was crashing my browser, and my computers are generally intended to handle this sort of thing, so I knew that that wouldn't be very tenable. So I had to choose a lesser of two evils here. It's workable. Sometimes revising things is painful. Don't sweat it too bad. Largely, it's going to be, you're not going to feel bad at the level that you're at. You're going to have a lot of nice stuff. It might not be exactly the same nice stuff. You might second guess some of your decisions. Ooh, Pierce Pin 2. I probably should have upgraded that a long time ago, huh? I don't know, Pierce Pin 3 is an 8th level ability, so I think we're actually in the right territory here. Two-hander, Pierce Pin 3. I could choose 4 right off the bat, but like I said, let's give it smaller increment upgrades. I was trying to think about the people who are playing the class at that point in time. It's usually better to choose several upgrades than to jump straight to the end ability. So here we've got, you had 459 XP. You don't have anything to look forward to until you hit 498. That's at least 3 games, maybe 4. So that's somebody playing for half a year before they get from Immune Fear to Two-Hander Pierce Pin 3. It's a nice ability, it's a nice upgrade, but it's a long time to wait for something. You're going to be faced with that a lot of the time in your teen levels. But, try to think about every step along the journey, I guess is what I'm saying. Alright, what else we got? We are getting near the end, believe it or not. Once you've gotten to the teens and you're getting these high-level abilities, there isn't long before you start getting into the really nice ones that cost an outrageous amount. So Two-Hander burst 4 hits. I'm sure that he's going to be very happy. I'm pretty sure Nick has enough XP to afford all of the things that I've just chosen right off the bat. Whew, that's one hell of a jump. That's 72 XP. So that's 4 games, 5 games for somebody to jump between those 2 steps. It's huge, but that is a really nice ability. That's going to decimate small groups of people. And yeah, I'm not surprised. We have spent way too much in combat abilities. We need to jump back to something else. Let's see, we got Immune Burst, we got Immune Fear. I had Immune Maim on my list. See if that's on here somewhere. Because what's as good as Pierce Maiming people? Saying immune when they try to Pierce Maim you back.
Okay, Mom, I'm done.
Can we do the Slay Heal 4? Probably. No, not quite. Need a few more levels and something else. I don't have any other passives that I had planned for this particular build. So we're going to have to go with a narrative. The narrative might not make as much sense as we would like it to. In this case, I was going to pick Insight. And the justification here is that they have such a refined sense of the intent to kill that they can recognize it in others without any words need being spoken. This might be a bit of a stretch, but no big deal. Let's do Slay, Heal 4, since that's a signature ability. And yeah, we're getting up into 11th level combat abilities. And I think that that'll be it for now. You don't actually have to build it all out to level 20. I know that that's going to seem weird, but the number of people who've ever reached past level 15 in the game could be counted on one hand. So, reasonably speaking, if you want to spec it out all the way to level 20, you can, but you don't need to. It's going to be just fine to stop in the mid to high teens, and most likely that's going to be a fully fleshed out class for anybody who's going to play it. Let's see. So, I'm not going to belabor it because it'll take me a long time. Naming is the hardest part. Always has been. I've had to put up with this for years. It's actually a bit of schadenfreude to listen to people, gnash their teeth over how much time it takes them to name something. Obviously, I named a couple things along here. But naming is fundamentally very important. It might not seem like it. Mechanically, this class is fine. Let's call this Pole Vault. That's fun. Maybe we call this Toughness. Or what was the merit that we used to have for gaining health? Fortitude. Makes sense for them. I like to name the same progression of abilities the same thing. And I called this Killer Instinct. That's a good one. See the difference here? Saying that I have Insight, I have the ability to call Insight, is different. Saying I have a Killer Instinct is a lot more thematic and it ties everything together. It makes the class make sense. I could have done this entire system without forcing people to name things, but the naming has become so important to the fluff. So it's the same as telling somebody, I am a level 5 human warrior, versus, I'm Javis. There's a difference here, and names give real meaning for people. So I encourage you, please name things. Please don't forget. It's important. I think David Reif had made like a Kensai build, which was cool. It's a spirit fighter, two-handed, two-weapon fighter kind of class, so it was fun by itself. But then he took one of the most bland abilities, melee 2 hits, just your standard extra damage ability, and he called it Lightning Strikes Twice. Like, holy shit, I want to play this class. That's super fun. Do that all day long. I was building out my Necromancer, and I gave them Immune Mute because, honestly, they're spellcasters and they need Immune Mute to not get shut down. But I called it Disembodied Voice. Again, it adds so much. So, anyway. Let's see, what else did I need to say before I finish up? Like I said, I'm not going to go through and name all of these things in front of you. I will eventually name all of them just to set a good example, if for no other reason. So public stuff. I've made it so you can keep things private, or you can make them public. It's not foolproof. Actually, if you go to the URL for a private class, you can still see it, but you won't be able to use the builder to build with it. I think that if you're like me, you'll build privately at first, partly because you don't want people to see an unfinished piece of work, partly because you're not sure if maybe you want to keep it for yourself. And I think that that's probably a good default. If you get to the end and you're very proud of it, you might then change your mind. I've done that several times. I had actually planned on the Gate Guardian being a private class, and then I liked it so much I wanted to share it. I'd planned on my Necromancer being my own private class, and then I liked it so much I wanted to share it. And I'm sure somebody else is going to come along and love it as much as I do. I hope that everybody does that same thing. I think that it will speak well of our system when people are building all sorts of stuff that they may have intended for themselves, but then that everybody gets to enjoy. Remember that we can build monsters with these, so maybe it's not even a matter of sharing it so that somebody else can play another character in play with the same class. Maybe you just want to be able to fight that class, which would be a lot of fun. I don't really want to fight the Blood Pike. This is not a fun class to fight. I'm going to back up and let somebody else handle that from a distance, because holy crap. But it just put it out there. I will say that if you're worried about being unique, if you built it for yourself, you can keep it. You can be unique. But the chances are that if somebody else comes into play and they have the same class, you'll still be unique. You're probably going to be a different race. You're probably going to have a different trade. You're almost certainly going to have different treasure and different XP amounts. And just like with what we've seen with races, when we had fewer races available, people would cluster around dwarves, for instance. Freaking a dozen dwarves in play at any given time is crazy, because of the camaraderie that came with that. Now, I'm going to play my Necromancer. I'm going to love the hell out of my Necromancer. But if somebody else comes in and plays a Necromancer, suddenly we've got something to talk about. That's fun too. So, I guess what I'm saying is just consider sharing. Sharing is caring, and I think everybody will benefit the more fun classes get built and shared. And obviously that'll help the folks who feel daunted by this whole process. I don't blame them. It's big and it's complicated and potentially very scary, but considering what you can get out of it, for instance, let's see, Nyx. Let's get to level 15. Angori's not in here yet. I actually built this to synergize with Angori. We'll just make it a Dwarf Blood Pike. And see what we get. Look at that. Immune to a bunch of crap. Armor 3. Carries people off the battlefield. Crits can find stuff. The Dwarf gives him Deflect, so we're going to ignore that. Angori actually get things like immune weakness and I think Breach. Some things that would have made sense for this class, but I wanted to synergize well. All the Pierce attacks, Pierce Pin 3, Pierce Maim, Pierce Bleed, Burst 4 hits. He's going to stand next to you, he's going to have an outrageous amount of reach, and he is going to hit you regardless of what you've got defending yourself. So that's going to suck. But hey, that's what a Blood Pike does. Alright, I think I have rambled on long enough. Hopefully you guys have a better understanding of the system. Hopefully you have an easier time. Again, go out, brainstorm, start with the concept, browse through triggers, effects, and modifiers, and kind of get an idea of a progression of abilities, passive, combat, and narrative that you want. Make sure that those are reasonably balanced before you walk in, and then you'll have a much easier time actually building things out. Hope you guys enjoy it.